war going on in Ukraine, which we don't know when it's going to end. It keeps us on our toes. We have riots in France, which have spread to Europe. We have a looming climate crisis, which the climatism experts tell us is upon us. But these are the physical things, and there are others too. But the one that seems a little bit more disturbing at the moment is an ideological battle going on. And I'm referring to wokeism here, particularly as it relates to gender identity and very young children. So, to give you a couple of examples of what's happening, I'm sure some viewers may know already, but just in case some don't. In California, there's a bill called the AB, I think it's 957. This bill says that if you have very young children, the age of 7, maybe, they have the right to express their own gender ideology or choose whichever gender they identify with the most. And if parents don't affirm their 7-year-old's choice, the child can be taken away from them. And what does it mean to affirm? Well, they expect that the child should be put into a program of care, which probably means some sort of drugs, puberty blockers, maybe even gender operations. And the parents have absolutely no choice in this. If they want to protest or they don't like what's being taught to their children, they go out and march. They get put on some kind of a hate list, and because they're extremists and anti-government. And then in the UK, we just had a recent case where a 13-year-old girl said she identified as a cat. And then two of her friends said, "No, mate, you're a girl, you're not a cat." And the teacher got involved and really told the two girls off and said, they were despicable and they should think about what they've said and maybe they should change schools. So it all seems a little bit bizarre. Abhijit Ji, what are your thoughts? Do you think that it's gone too far? Has wokeism crossed a red line?
Um, well, it's a historical line. I don't know if it's a red line, but you look at every society that collapsed in the past. You see this kind of glorification of sexuality and gender and etc. etc. You look at Rome in its declining days. It was all about orgies and sex and hedonism and pleasure and all of that, right? Uh, this is what happens to empires or systems coming to an end, because they've somehow reached a certain plateau where there is there's no room for societal movement, and the only way you can manufacture some kind of a political anger is through finding non-issues, or much more dangerously exploiting uh, things that had better not be, uh, I won't say discussed, but certainly not things that you can just throw out in the public out there. There is such a thing as having certain discussions in private and certain discussions in public, but it's very natural. We kind of knew this was, well, we couldn't predict how mad it was getting, but the more and more society turned from manufacturing towards services, we knew what the services industry wanted was consumers of services, not producers of services, consumers of services. And in that sense, rage or outrage has become the biggest product to sell today. So you find that, a lot of this is actually being pushed by the tech companies in Palo Alto. It's being pushed by an entire set of jobless people who need to validate their lack of expertise, their lack of training, and pass it off as something intelligent or important. Uh, it's fantastic for actual tech companies that do manufacturing, not just services, because what happens is it boosts the sales of their products, because in order to access those services, you first have to have the tech in hand. And what you're seeing essentially is this sort of singularity where way too many interests are incentivized into celebrating and propagating serious mental health issues as uh, normal somehow. This is not normal. Let me give you a simple example. I'm gay. When I was a kid, I didn't understand what being gay was, and so I used to cross dress. I mean, I still do every now and then because who doesn't like a good drag show, a good clean drag show. But I used to literally think of myself as a girl and wear all of that. It wasn't an issue at home, but it certainly wasn't celebrated at home. Like there was this thing: you do it, fine, you do it at home, but then when we're going out to a party and things like that, at least dress up like a good little kid and whatever. So even till a few years back, the American Medical Association's definition of a mental illness, uh, you could have any fetish you wanted, bondage, sadomasochism, extreme sadomasochism, whatever, as long as it didn't spill out into work. The moment it started affecting work, it got classified as a mental disease. Okay, growing up, it was perfectly fine doing whatever you wanted to do at home, just don't do it on the outside. And it wasn't because it was shameful or anything. It was just that, why do you want to draw attention to yourself? Why can't you just fit in? Like, it reduces the number of opportunities for you. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I'll tell you what, it certainly helped me in a lot of ways. Because as I grew older, I realized I absolutely was not a woman. I would not be comfortable being a woman. I'm very comfortable being a man who likes men. Right. The one thing that nobody wants to talk about in all of this, in the gender affirmation part, is how homophobic it actually is. It is a genocide of gay men and lesbian women because you are not allowed to be a man and like men or be a woman and like women. You essentially, the confusion that you have as a kid is exploited, it is weaponized, and it's weaponized into a state institution to be wielded against your family. Essentially, the USA has become the USSR, and the UK has become the USSR as well, except the UK has, well, a king. Uh, a, a, Instead of a czar, they have a commissar now.
That's very interesting because if this was, if today's ideology was applied to you, you would have probably undergone some kind of operation by now, and there's no
Yes,
coming back.
there was absolutely no coming back from that because
Mm.
remember, you will have the physicality of a female genital, but none of the functionality or the functions of pleasure that accrue to, and female sexuality and male sexuality are very important to males and females to feel that sense of fulfillment and love, or even just plain lust, is a very important human instinct. This has gone beyond for me mentally. This is now why borderline. It's gone past criminality into sickening genital mutilation. Let's call it what it is. It's child genital mutilation. There's no difference between some Bedouin somewhere in Africa sitting and chopping off women's clitorises and vaginas because they shouldn't feel pleasure, to what is now being rationalized as gender affirming care.
Yeah, it's the mind boggles. I mean,
Or the making of eunuchs in Rome.
right, right. It does, it seems very strange because if I think to the olden days when I was growing up, we had gays and lesbians, and all they wanted was equality, acknowledgement, and fair opportunities, and then they just wanted to be left alone to get on with their lives. Whereas now it seems to have taken on quite an aggressive stance, this whole LGBTQ plus movement. And it's almost like if you don't agree with their ideology, then there's a problem with you. And it
Very
can take a very
interesting.
sinister turn.
They literally go around like little Hitler Youth brigades or Red Guard brigades, where you're required to recite from Mao Zedong's Red Book, or you'll be thrown off the roof or whatever. Essentially, what they are, and let's be clear, LGBT, all have different sets of problems. There is no single problem common to them all. With gay people, it's a different set of problem. With lesbians, it is a question of women's emancipation, which becomes a lot easier with industrialization, where you know the only real difference between men and women is men are capable of greater physical work. Otherwise, women are just as smart in everything, and that mechanization and industrialization remove that gap. Women have a slightly different issue, compounded with the issue of women's representation. Bisexuals, it's a question mark. There's open discrimination against them even in the LGBTQ community. Trans people are the worst of the lot because they have the worst kind of horrific discrimination against them, sold off to beggars when they are kids, genitally mutilated, God knows what not happens to them. Uh, they are the really disprivileged community in all of this. And to combine all these issues into one under that sick notion of intersectionality is the worst possible thing you could do. And look, we all knew this was being weaponized. We could see it being weaponized. It's been politically weaponized. Basically, we've gone back to the Dark Ages. In the Dark Ages, you had church dogma. Anybody opposed it, off to the fire you go, out of the fray, you're burnt alive unless you recant. How different is what we're doing today? In the UK, you can actually get jailed for saying certain things. You saw that unfair dismissal case in the UK where the lady was convicted of transphobia for insisting that men and women are separate, and the tribunal upheld her sacking from her job. With the right to freedom is the right to offend. If you do not have the right to offend, then you have no right to freedom of expression. Full stop. It's that simple.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.